Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live weekend edition of To the Moon, Allison, all the way from Glacian. I am freezing here. Actually, I'm sweating because I'm going to die, but I'll keep this on just for the gag. But we are here to talk about the best in science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction, and romance. And you know what? Nobody does it better than our guest today, STACEY McEWAN, coming to us live from Australia. STACEY, hello, and how are you?
Hello. That was probably the nicest introduction I've ever had in my life.
Really?
It's
that was
so undeserved.
And I'm taking this off because, so I'm in Orange, and it was really funny because, so for those of you who have not read STACEY's books, the Glacian Trilogy, and there's 2 out now, they are all set in this fictional world that is snowy and up on a mountain. Everyone's freezing to death. And then I looked up where you live. STACEY, you live basically in the Australian equivalent of where I live. It's never even cold where you are.
No, true. That is true. In fact, we've had like the warmest winter on record ever.
Yeah, and I'm like,
very much so that there was only a few days that I was like, should probably put a jumper on today.
Maybe.
Yeah, so I understand the contradiction.
So just I have to translate back to American English because jumper, she's not jumping, it's a sweater. So I
there's no unaliving happening. I mean, like,
well, that and you live in a place with lots of jumping animals, so I'm like, she's wearing a kangaroo. I just have to clarify.
Not wearing a kangaroo. My sweater is made out of kangaroo fur, to be clear. It is made out of kangaroo fur.
How do they weave that? Do they shave them, or do you still have like the kangaroo's head on top? Because that's a little creepy if it is.
Well, so the tail acts as like the belt or a sash.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can use like the head as like a hood.
Oh, I like it. It's a built-in hoodie.
But I'm classy. I don't do that.
I appreciate that. I can see that would not be on style for you. And, you know, as we were talking earlier, I am on style today with my retro Glacian banner. Like, I'm in the throne room, and I would really like to throw myself into the pool of Iskra, mostly just to fix my hair because it's hot and I'm sweating. But, you know, I was so excited to introduce STACEY. I didn't even introduce myself. And I'm Allison Hubbard. I'm the author of the Bourbon books and also works with speculative fiction, which is why I have the show that makes no sense to anyone because it's speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and romance. But like romantasy is a thing now, so I feel like having the romance in there is almost, it's kind of required. And no one does romantasy better than you, STACEY. And I appreciate that you've like tried to get your husband and the rest of the world in on this. So as I said before we went live, some people know STACEY as the amazing fantasy author that she is. Some of people know you more as the person who wanders down hallways, flipping your hair, and trying to tell your husband that he has to brood more and maybe flare a nostril. Has he decided to leave you yet, or is he going to stick around for the entire series?
Well, no, he knows that philanthropy is my passion.
Yes.
And that I just want to help the world be better. So he's in it for the long haul.
That's good.
If anything, he's become quite cocky. Now, I understand that this is usually something we may like in a male main character, but in your husband, I've learned that that's not something we really like. He truly believes that he's the talent of this operation at this point. Where it began with him just being like quite annoyed, he now seems to relish it. So people need to stop feeling sorry for him.
Okay.
I think that's my main message.
Yeah, that he should not be getting sympathy here for any of that. And honestly, the time when he was supposed to be staring longingly into your eyes and instead marked you like Simba, I was like, no, he's gone. You know, like
that was my first red flag.
Yeah,
my very first red flag. Okay, he might be enjoying this.
Well, I think he did. And I don't know if you make him read any of your books, because then if he did, he would just get with the program and wouldn't need to be taught all this stuff, which is pretty straightforward if he just was reading and following the plot and knowing what was going on with Dawson and Ryan and all the people on the ledge and the people down in Tursor and up in Glacia. And I had to actually, these are my notes. This is how I take notes. It's on the back of an envelope. You probably can't see it. In marker, because I was never going to get all the names right. So every time a new name came along, I was writing it down to make sure I would get
very impressed so
far. But one of the names, I just lost it when we got to make Kazriel, mostly because I knew he was a balloon creature. And I was hoping he might join us today on the interview, but he seems to be busy. So that's fine. We don't need him. It's okay.
So sorry. Yeah, no, we definitely need to talk to his people before he makes an
Yeah,
appearance.
It's hard enough to coordinate because I'm in the United States, I'm in California, and we were going back and forth with your publicist because you're on another day now. We're not even in the same. We're barely on the same planet.
True, it's Sunday here. Yeah.
Sunday. How is Sunday? Tell us about the future. What are you doing?
Very sunny. At least in my part of the world, it's very sunny. Nothing bad or catastrophic has happened yet. So that's all we can really hope for.
It is. I mean, it's morning. So right now you still have the best of the day ahead of you. And hopefully this interview will set you on a good path and we'll take it from there. So
that's Stacey, what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
What I want to know is, how did you get the idea to be writing about a place cold, bitter, high in the sky when you are living in the warm Gold Coast of California? Where did the whole idea for these characters in this trilogy come from? What's the inspo there?
Well, I get this question a lot. I'd like to open by saying that I've been cold before, so I know what that feels like, and that I did use some of my imagination. Yes, maybe I'm not very nuanced in things made of snow and ice, but I looked at pictures on Pinterest of snowy mountains, and I thought that I knew what I was talking about. The inspo came from, first of all, I hate the cold. I hate it so much.
You're like, and so does Boston.
Yeah, the few times that I've been to the snow, I've literally gotten there the first day, been wet and exhausted, and thought, why have I paid thousands of dollars to come on a trip like this? I don't understand the purpose. I don't understand why are people smiling here. I'd like to know why they're smiling. Are they hiding something? What's so fun about this?
I don't know. They're the kind who have like those warmers in their pockets, because I think you probably didn't have that, or your kangaroo hood, because that would probably help as a start. But honestly, I don't particularly like being cold either. And I live in a place that's it's almost rarely ever cold. And then when I do go to the snow, it's like, this is nice. 5 minutes of this is nice. And then I'm like, okay, I can go home now.
Oh, I like the scenery, and that's it. That's pretty much it. I want to stay in the chalet and drink hot chocolate or coffee or like whiskey or scotch or something. That's what I want to do. But I really wanted to write a story about a character that had to survive some kind of wilderness, because I love those stories. But they've been done a million times before, and I had to come up with something original, because I don't know if you know this, Allison, being an author, but we actually have to come up with original stories. It's so annoying.
It gets really hard when you're like...
It's the most annoying.
All the stories have been told, and then you think you have a cool idea, and then someone's like, oh, just like this book that came out 6 months ago, but somehow you didn't hear about it.
Correct.
Like, damn it.
God damn it, yeah. So every single time that happens. But I thought, instead of doing like the dude who's stuck on the boat, like trying to find desert island, or like someone stuck in the desert or something, trying to find an oasis, I would do this snowy landscape. So I already had like the snowy landscape thing. I knew I wanted to write about like a powerful, fierce female main character. It made sense to me that she would have some kind of deadly weapon that she was really fond of, and I would assume that you'd need to burn things to keep warm. So I was like, I guess it's going to be an axe. Doesn't make sense for her to be carrying around a sword. So I had that, and then I had the idea of what if her whole objective as a character isn't trying to escape the icy, hostile place. Like, what if she can't escape? What if that's the entire premise, is that she's been trapped there her whole life? And so I sort of started building this world to trap her there, and wondered how that would happen. Like, how do you trap it? Yeah. How do you trap a character in a place like that? And so that's where the idea for the ledge came.
Well, I love it, because it's like ice block by ice block, but then it's like, yeah, you can get out, but you're not going to survive if you do, because there's that thing called the chasm. And it's death if you go down really that way.
Far. So far, yeah.
Stuck up there with your trees that might have people's initials on it, meaning that's theirs for their firewood and their axe, and you better back off, mister. And, you might have sex with the boy next door because he's warm. I mean, body heat's a thing. I think that was a really pragmatic choice for Dawson to make, to be warm. I'm in favor of sex for warmth. I don't see the problem there. And honestly, I liked how we established early on that it's like, these people, they don't have anything else to do.
Like, what else are they going to do? Also, she's alone. She's alone. You know?
She doesn't have her den of girls anymore. And that made me really sad as well, because a lot of the story, well, not a lot, but there's bits of the story that are told through flashbacks or just Dawson reminiscing about how things were before it became, well, it's just Dawson now, which is how she ends up being one put up for, you know, I am tribute. And we have like this little bit of a Hunger Games thing, but there's no games involved. It's just you get there, and if you get picked up, you're just, well, you're dead meat. Good luck. Bye. See ya.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You're screwed and goodbye. And when there's nobody else behind you to like, well, I guess it could be me. It's me.
Yeah.
All right. But that was just the beginning of the story. We were like this far into the book before Dawson gets into this whole new world and taken to Glacia. I'm sorry, I just keep pointing at this. It's sparkly and it makes me amused. Where are these creatures? So one of the things I really loved about your book, and I read a lot of fantasy, and I do not want to denigrate any other fantasy author out there who's doing their own spin on things, but I see a lot of the same stories where it's like, okay, there's knights and there's a kingdom and there's a castle and there's a something, and we've all seen like the J.R.R. I forget how many R's are there before we get to the Tolkien, and that's really fun, and that version of it is kind of all in our cultural understanding of what things are like. But I like that you're like, we're not going that direction, and it still will totally feel fantasy because of the magic, and just like I was asking myself, all right, well, is this high fantasy? Sure, why not? I don't really know what high fantasy requires, but you have that, I would say, like integrated magic that everybody just accepts, because these creatures, and they're not people, they just start flying and running off with people by their talons. And that's kind of one of those terrifying ideas. Like, I was doing a lap in our neighborhood and told my kid, I'm like, look, on that wall over there yesterday when I was walking, there was a hawk. And she's like, Mom, you can't be outside with there's a hawk because you're small enough. It'll try to take off with you. I'm like, I'm not that small. That's rude, and you're short too. But a person-sized one where they're even bigger than people, and then they have these talons and they just pierce your flesh and drag you off. And so what animal hurt you as a child that inspired that?
Well, I mean, I'm from Australia, so like pick whichever one that you want.
They're all terrifying or cute or both.
Yeah,
but
true.
Kind of
my husband does like to joke that this whole idea for the Glacians came from the fact that I'm deathly afraid of chickens.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that they scratch. That's so suspicious to me. What are you scratching?
They're very small dinosaurs. They're nuggety dinosaurs.
Correct. I have no trust. I have no trust for chickens. Roosters are worse. They're so angry. Mm-hmm. Who hurt them? Not me. But I mean, it might be me. They just run at you.
I've eaten a lot of chicken in my life, so if they look at me and can tell just my makeup of how many nuggets I've consumed over my life, they probably do have reason to be angry. But that's why I don't eat alligator or shark or anything that could possibly eat me in the wild, because I have a non-aggression pact. I haven't signed one with chickens, and maybe I should, and then be like, peace out, chicken.
This is an interesting new classification for a diet, because that's not vegetarianism or veganism. This is like a pragmatic choice that you're making to boycott certain animals, so that they don't find you to seek vendetta.
That's actually exactly why, because I don't know how much horror you read, but we've had our friend Josh Mallerman come on several times, and he's written a book. I mean, he's most well known for Bird Box and things like that, and that's terrifying, but nothing in Bird Box is real. But he wrote a book that was originally called On This, the Day of the Pig, and then it was republished as Pearl. And Pearl is a pig, and Pearl will come find me and kill me. So I don't eat pork anymore, because he kind of scared the crap out of me to the point where I'm like, that's it, I'm done. And I told one of my friends who already is a vegetarian, I'm like, you just can't read this. You just can't. It's too much for you. I want you to be soothed and not have nightmares, because I can't get past it. And now my kids are like, Mom, why no bacon? I'm like, you'll eat your turkey bacon and you'll be happy. But I understand.
The turkeys do not pose as much of a threat.
And I
get it.
Kat's asking some questions, and she has some valid questions, but she's putting them all in one question. So hold on for the massive wall of text. Here we go. So Kat wants to know, Catherine Curry Haas, aka Life Introverted on everything, where she's got a jillion followers. Hey Stacey, are you a plotter or a pantser? And do you have a set of writing habits, routines you do to prioritize writing between being a parent and trying to turn your husband into a fictional boyfriend? Asking for a friend who is myself, who lately has cleaned literal baseboards to get out of writing lately. Kat, I know you have. You've remodeled like 3 houses instead of getting back to the work that you're supposed to be doing, and we're waiting on pages. So she also says, standard for me, and yes, we know, but I'll put the wall of text back up. So let's take these things one at a time. Stacey, are you a plotter or a pantser, or do you just like stare at chickens until you get inspiration for how to make them more terrifying and icy? Ice chickens.
I feel like now that you mentioned that, that would have been the smartest course, but I am a plotter, probably to a painful degree. Like I will literally sit on like the planning phase or the brainstorming phase for months before I start writing, if I can, unless I'm pushed into beginning writing. But like I usually have like just a plain line journal thing that looks like this, and I just fill it with basically bullshit that doesn't make sense to anyone except for me, you know. Like I just and none of it's ordered or organized or anything. But once I've done that, I feel like I can start a plot outline. And so I'll do that. And once I've got the plot outline and I sort of know chapter by chapter what scenes need to be included in those chapters, then I'll start writing. So, and then, you know, halfway through the story, it gets derailed and I've got to change the whole thing.
Do you grab a new notebook at that point and go back to the beginning? Or do you just like tear out pages, wad them up, throw them in the fire for warmth?
Yeah. Basically, or, you know, sometimes I just eat them because I'm angry.
Eat your words, quite literally.
I literally eat my words. Yeah, so that's sort of my process. That was the most asshole thing I've ever said in my life, by the way.
But I mean, people want to know because there are people who are plotters and there are people who are pantsers, and it feels like we're at war with each other over the right way to write books. And the stupid thing is, of course, there's no right way.
Oh, that's ridiculous. There is no right way to write a book. Ask anyone ever. Yeah,
and people who are like, oh, but I'm this, which are you. And it's like, if they do the same thing you do, it's like it's for validation. And if they don't, they're like, then I must be doing it wrong because they wrote amazing books and mine aren't doing what I want them to do. So I must need somebody else's process.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I've tried pantsing a book before and it's gone so far off the road that I couldn't actually bring it back on track. And then the next book that I tried to write, I plotted out everything to a painful degree. Still went off the tracks, didn't manage to finish the manuscript. So I don't know. I don't think that there's a right way. I think there's just like a preferred way for you. And sometimes the manuscript's going to write really nicely and easily. And sometimes it's going to be a really hard, long slog, you know?
That is true. And I know I've written books that have come out really quickly and it's like, this is just like whipped cream. You're just spraying the nozzle and things are kind of getting everywhere. And other times you're just turning butter and going, how much longer do I have to do this before something usable comes up? And a Kat adds, the only thing she is sure of is that my way of writing is absolutely wrong. Kat, that is not true. I've read your books.
No, that's not true.
It's not accurate.
But we always say that about ourselves, don't we?
Well, we do, and especially if we're hitting roadblocks, but seeing what's working on somebody else's road doesn't help us with our roadblocks. So it is lovely, and I really just like your book, the aesthetic of the nice black notebook there. I'm the kind of person to be like, I don't want to write in it because it's so pretty, and my handwriting is, I mean, you can't see this because my webcam is probably not there, but do you see how bad my handwriting is? And you wonder why. I see. And since I was listening, do you like all my notes there?
I'm a teacher, and so I do like handwriting. Yeah. But I get excited over stationery. Do you get excited over stationery ever? I get quite excited over stationery. I get excited about the fact that it's tax deductible. So this is like motivation for me. So if I've got a book that I need to start or anything, like this is the thing that gets me like real excited about it. So yeah, I'm just like, woohoo. And I buy fancy pens and stuff, and it's really fun. Have a good old time.
You're not using like Crayolas like I was, because mine are just whatever I found from my kids' books. And I need this, thank you. And this was an envelope. I pay most of my bills online, so this was a bill that I didn't pay. Good for me. All right.
I mean, like that's you're so real for that.
It's accurate. It's not organized, but it's accurate.
If my kids touch this book, they might need to change their living situation.
They're going to live with the chickens, honestly.
Yeah. I'm going to put them in the chicken coop for sure.
Well, and I don't know if we got all of the things you mentioned a little bit when Kat was asking about your writing habits and routines. You do have the children who should not touch that book. Yours, I saw a picture, so I'm assuming they're still of the age where they're around a lot. Like they're just there. Like they probably aren't gone a lot. Like mine are gone now from 8:30 when I throw them at their various schools, or 8 in the morning, and then I've got to go get them on various days because they all have weird pickups now because my middle's in middle school, and all I do is drive now. Yeah. But are yours are still short enough that they're underfoot most of the time?
Well, no, so they're 8 and 9. Sorry, she just turned 9 and 5 now. Okay. So the youngest one started school this year, which is amazing. Because it's meant that I teach, but this year I've only taught 3 days a week. So I've had Mondays and Tuesdays every week at home in a nice, quiet house to myself. And it has been absolute heaven. And it's the only reason that I've gotten through the year so far as well, honestly, because it's so much work. Like it's so much work. I don't know if you know this, Allison, but writing, so much work. Have you found that?
And
so much work.
Because I think everybody has different life events and different things that they're balancing, whether it's work or kids or travel or whatever they're working around. And for me, I wrote for years, just like bits here and there. And then I started the book that I first had, like my first, I'm really going to query this one. Okay. You know, that book, the one that's ready.
Yeah.
It took several years.
This is my best stuff.
Yeah. Like 1 hour a week. Not even every week, when my mother-in-law would watch my youngest, and I got to about 65,000 words, and then he went to the magical place of preschool where they actually did have chickens. So I know I'm all looking at a little one eye up going on. I'm not sure if I trust them anymore, but they raised all of my children, and none of my children are afraid of chickens. So I guess that's okay. And once he was gone at school, I finished that book in 2 months. And I'm just like, oh, so the thing here was that I have to be able to think and not have you going, mommy, 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 mommy. And that does make a difference. So honestly,
100%.
that makes a huge difference. And for me, there are times when now you're in Australia and your holidays are like opposite ours, because it's, okay, you're coming into, do you even have fall the same time, or are you spring now? What season is it?
No, so we've just come into spring now. So we've just finished our winter, coming into spring. Okay. So all our holidays, like obviously all of our holidays are at the same time. They're just in opposite weather. So our Christmas is in summer.
Yeah, so bikini Christmas party is totally normal there. And, you know, it's fall leaves and Easter eggs, which sure, that makes sense. And so I get that. So I don't know what your school kids' holidays are like. Are they, like for me, I've been waiting for them to go back to school, because when they're home, I'm just like, don't kill each other. Stop. What are you doing? Get that out. Why is there a piece up the ice maker? Like that happens in my house all the time.
So we've just finished our semester. We've just finished our term 3, and we've got 2 weeks. So this is the start of 2 weeks of holidays before we go back for our final term. And then we've got our summer holidays, which are like 6 weeks long. So I guess it's just reversed. So our long holiday is over Christmas and the New Year, and then we come back at the end of January and we start our next school year. So, but you guys, and every time I talk to Americans about this, they're like, "That's so weird." I'm like, "No, do you know what's weird? You guys start your school year in September. That's weird."
Mm-hmm. No, it is weird, and honestly, yours makes more sense because we always have to have the 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024 school year. Yours is just like, it is the year it is, and that's it. Why are you guys making things complicated? And it makes a lot of sense. But it's that nobody wants to start or stop a year in the middle of snow. Like that's depressing.
And you need to have you need to have your long holidays in the middle in summer. I get it.
I think that's all you can do about it. And so, Kat, your way is not wrong. Your way works for you. Stacey's working around children who are now on holiday, and hopefully now that they're a little bit older, you're able to get a little bit more done with those, especially those days off. Now you've got a holiday for a couple weeks. I don't know if you're just gonna drink the whiskey you were mentioning earlier to get through, or if you actually think you can get stuff done. If so, kudos. But to each their own drink.
I mean, I will, but it will be in the dead of night, which is how I wrote Ledge anyway, because I still had Dean, my youngest. He was 3 and 4 when I wrote Ledge, and so he was still underfoot all the time, at home all the time. I didn't have the free days like I do this year, where I'm kidless. So Ledge was literally written in between the hours of 8 p.m. and 12 a.m. every night at the dinner table, because there was no hope for doing it any other time of
the
day.
fact that you wrote that and in the middle of the night and you were coherent, I don't even know how to process that, because the fact that you were able to write words after midnight, for me, after 9 p.m., my brain's just kind of mush, and I don't even know where I am or what's happening. So, are you a night owl?
Can't do it very well. I am a night owl. I find that I reach a point where that's when I'm like, I feel like I should spring clean. Like that seems to be like the good thing that I could do now. So yeah, I am a night owl. But having said that, I did not claim that anything that I wrote was coherent, or that I was coherent. It was just there, and then once it's there, you can edit it, right? So I wrote a very dodgy, scrappy version of Ledge, and then it took a lot of editing to get it up to scratch. But to be very honest with you, I quite literally never want to have to work like that again, because it was not sustainable, and I was waking up in the morning and going to work, you know. That's not a fun time for anyone, and it means no downtime for you as a human being, which I've learned we do need. Yeah, so as much as I'm really proud of that book, and like it was a means to an end, I was determined that when I wrote CHASM, it was not going to be in the same fashion. I was not going to be burning the candle at both ends, and I was going to utilize these couple of days off that I had. So CHASM was a bit of a mixture. So Dean wasn't at school yet, but I did put him in kindy, and so I had 1 day a week where my eldest was in school and Dean was in kindy, and I could write my little heart out, and then I went to work the rest of the time, and anything that I needed to make up, I would still do it at night, but I limited myself so that I was still going to bed at a decent hour, and I was doing less at night. But this year has been a lot better because I've had those 2 days. Having said that, I started at a brand new school and went in a brand new class, and that has posed its own challenges because I felt like I was basically starting from scratch as a teacher and trying to traverse a brand new job and transition my kids into a brand new school, and it's much further away from home, and yeah, I spend a lot of my time in the car. So this year's been really challenging in its own way, just different. Fingers crossed that next year there's more free time, less driving, less teaching, hopefully, and I can write more in the light of day.
Yeah, daylight writing is usually better for, I mean, there are people who that's their preferred time. They are more alert at night, and God bless their biological clock being set to weird circadian rhythms, but it's not most of us. So for people who do it and are like, no. If you really care about it, you'll do it at night. But the flip side is if you really care about it and then you read it and you're like, this is not coherent, and now I'm not going to edit it. It's a trade-off, you know? Okay, so yeah. Melissa wanted to know, she said, Stacey, I love your videos, you're hilarious. What's the last book you've read and loved?
The last book I read was a romantic comedy by Tessa Bailey called Fix Her Up, which was like a fake dating type scenario, and it was really, really smutty, and yes, and it was just like a really good palate cleanser because I'd just come off the back of reading 3 fantasy books in a row, and those fantasy books that I read were really, really good, but they weren't fantasy books that I necessarily read by choice. That sounds terrible, but what I'm trying to say is that I was passed those books by people and said, can you please read this and provide a review? And I was like, yeah, sure, I can. So I read these 3 books that were on my list. They were arcs and things like that I'd be given. And then after very, very heavy, 3 very, very heavy high fantasy books, I was like, I need a rom-com. So I read that and I enjoyed it immensely.
Well, and so Kat says she loved that book. So I'm guessing, Kat, if you haven't already told Melissa, put that one on the list, because I know we are always talking about getting. It was
super. It was very fun.
And we're looking for the high smut content because that is something I know Melissa specifically is looking for good smut. Kat, I'm not saying you're looking for good smut, but I know Melissa was looking for smut. So if Stacey says smutty enough, And that's good to know, because you do, I think, the same thing I do, which is you go back and forth between going for fantasy or then rom-coms, and especially when you have kind of your head in both worlds, it's also easier for me to separate books if I'm not reading like back to back same genre. I like to have something else in there, and for me a lot of times I'll get like a horror in there, or like I'll go do some ridiculous romance, and it's just a lot easier for my brain to separate, like putting a little line in them. And it's so funny because I do read multiple books at the same time. Do you do that, or do you try to keep yours like separate? Finish one, then the next one.
I used to read multiple books at the same time, but I find that, and I still do sometimes if I have like a break from writing, but I find that if I'm writing as well and then reading multiple books at the same time, and like just with everything else in life, it's just too many tabs open in my brain, and it actually becomes unenjoyable now. So sometimes I go back to that when there's like a dip, if I'm on holiday or whatever, I've got an audiobook going, but then I've got a physical book going and that sort of thing. But no, I try to streamline it now. But I'm very much like you. Like I'll read a fantasy and then I follow it up with a rom-com. And for some reason, that's usually followed up by like war fiction. And then after that, I'll read a suspense and then I go back to fantasy again. So I kind of, yeah. And I don't know why I'm like that, but.
No, I like that because there are some people I know. Like they have their one lane and they don't leave that lane. And even if people are
I've got lots of friends like that.
Like I only read this, and I just think, doesn't your brain want a little bit of mix it up there? And I do the same thing with, I've got one in audio and then one either physical or Kindle, because it's like my ears are doing one thing and my eyes are doing another thing, and that helps that separation. But it's so funny because people are like, how do you read more than one book at once? Well, we don't usually watch. We growing up, we all watched shows, and we would watch different shows, and we weren't like, but I got Growing Pains completely confused with Family Matters. Like, guys, it's different. No, you didn't. But I don't know if it's because the visual matter and that we're having to create these people in our heads and we can't do that. Or maybe it's we just blame binging TV now that we only do watch one show. And then when some places only release one at a time, we're like, how dare you? And they're like, we used to do this all the time. And we're like, but we don't like it anymore. I want to watch 10 hours and I'm watching it now.
I very much think that it's the latter. Because even as a kid, I read multiple books at the same time, and I just picked up the one that I was in the mood for, and I never seemed to have an issue like trying to get back into the world. I just like picked it up again and was like, yeah, no, I remember. I also think it has something to do with our comprehension skills and our ability to be able to flip into that, like the effort that our brain is going to keep up with the world and to comprehend it. So that might have something to do with it as well. But sometimes I think, am I flipping between books because my brain has an attention span that is, that of a gnat, and I can't actually stay engaged in one story at a time anymore? Like, have I become so used to scrolling through social media and having like a plethora of options available to me on Netflix that I'm just like used to jumping back and forth between? But I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just know that sometimes the thought of reading a couple of books at once is completely overwhelming, and so I won't do it. And sometimes I'm like totally fine with it. I've got an audiobook going and I read that in the car, or listen to it in the car, or while I'm doing the housework, and then I've got the physical and I've got something else on the Kindle, and it just works.
Okay, and Elisa says, I always read only one book at a time because I didn't want to put it down, but I was also the kid who would always eat all the veggies, then all the meat, etc. at dinner. Elisa, can your food touch, or is that a thing? Because I know my sister won't let her food touch, and I didn't know that growing up, but she should have gotten like the cafeteria style trays with the segmented stuff. And I've never seen Elisa not let her food touch, but I don't know. But I get that, like that one, and then move on, and then this one.
Yeah. I actually think that's a really healthy way to like work your way through life, because I find that like the older I get, the more I convolute all the things on my list that I have to do, and I start jobs and then don't finish them. And I'm talking about like everyday little jobs. Oh, her food can touch.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Well, and I'm trying to think of the last time I've seen, like, I know Elisa in real life, and I've seen her eat food, but I've never seen her eat more than one food at a time, like a sandwich, but the sandwich is supposed to touch because it's a sandwich. It's not like a sandwich next to something else. So now I'm sitting there picturing all the things I've seen Elisa eat, and I don't think I should.
Now starting to think that I'm a very chaotic eater. Like if I have chicken nuggets and chips on a plate, I'm like going chicken nugget, chip, chip, chicken nugget, chip, chicken nugget, chip, 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 you know, like it's chaos.
Now we need like the chaotic, neutral, lawful good. We need to figure out where we all find in our reading styles and on our food styles. And honestly, I do know, like, so Kat says ADHD reader brain is real. It totally is. And I know that for some of us having things like, for me, I love audiobooks. And for me, it's not so much an attention span thing. It is, I have no time to just sit and read a book. And if I do, the minute my body gets too comfortable, I'm asleep. So I can't do that. If I'm doing that, I'm driving, I'm walking, I'm folding all the laundry, and that's fine. But it's not something that I can just, I'm going to sit and read this book, iPad to the face. You know, it's I get a little dent in my head. So I understand
very much me as well.
Yeah, like
100%.
You get me too comfortable and I'm snoring, so that helps. But I do know people are like, I can't focus on a book unless it's like that, and others who are like, I can't focus on a book if it's audio because then my mind wanders. So I will never reader shame anybody who likes one style over another. All ways of reading are great. I'm never going to be ableist about, well, you're blind and you read by Braille. That's not right. Guys, seriously, with your fingers? This is not your eyeballs. Like, reading with ears is great. Reading with fingers is great. It's all good. So I'm fine with it. But I mean, I understand teachers want children to read with their eyes so that they learn to process and break down the words. That's a skill too. And so are you teaching little people to read or older kids who probably have it figured out by now?
I've done a mix over the years, but this year I'm teaching year 5 kids who are around 10 years old. So for the most part, they've got it figured out, with the exception of a few. There's still lots of reading skills that they need to learn. So it's something that we do every single day. But otherwise, I've definitely taught younger year. I've taught all the way down in prep, which year is when they're 5 years old and they enter school. I've done the entire span of teaching kids how to read. And it is a very, very large task, but a really rewarding one. It's always been my favorite part of teaching, I reckon, teaching kids how to read.
Well, and my husband teaches, and it is year 5 here too. So 10-year-olds are in 5th grade. I know when I talk to my friends in the UK, we always have to do the translation of like, what is prep? What is nursery? Where is your kid? What is, I don't know what that means. I had a whole
literally different. It's literally different in every country, I found.
It's so confusing. One of my friends, we were talking about getting good collagen, and I was telling her she could have Jello, and she's like, jelly. I'm like, no, not jelly. Jelly has pectin. And then the fact that Jello and jelly are different things in different countries, I'm like, can we at least call food the same? I knew the whole crisps versus chips. You guys call them chips. They call them crisps. And I thought yours, because of the accent, you'd be more like them, but I think you guys are more like us. So everybody's just...
Well, we have so much... We've got a lot of British blood, so I think but we do have very different terms to Britain. We sort of just started making up our own stuff. In Australia, everything is a chip.
Everything is a chip.
Hot. Yeah, fries are chips, crisps are chips, everything's a chip. Crackers are chips. Everything's a chip. And then we have biscuits, which are not the same as your biscuits.
Your biscuits are cookies.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. My friend was recently at a salon, and she's like, I got tea and a biscuit. I'm like, I know you're at a nice salon, but it sounds like you're at a doggy spa because they gave you a biscuit for being a good girl. And she's like, I know, but it sounded weird. I didn't know what was happening, but I'm glad
you have a cup of tea. That we inherited from the Brits. But yeah, you have a cup of tea and you have a biscuit. It's not a dog biscuit. And you guys have like dough. You guys have like dough biscuits.
Ours are dough biscuits, and KFC makes them where it's like cut out in rounds and you slice it in the middle and you put honey butter and just raise your cholesterol in one bite, just right there. And they're delicious. And we also have do you guys have Red Lobster down there to have the Cheddar Bay biscuits?
No.
They are the best things ever. It's 80% cheese and 2% biscuit and some garlic in there, and then they're warm.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
It's kept a mediocre seafood restaurant in business for at least 50 years at this point. Cheddar Bay biscuits are the best, and the lobster's questionable, but that biscuit, man, that's what I wanted. Yeah, I don't know, and I was trying to figure out. I have British people that I contact when I'm trying to have British characters say things appropriately, and I couldn't figure out what to call a crescent roll because they don't have crescent rolls. And she's like, a bap. I'm like, I can't use that word. That's offensive. She's like, It's not. I'm like, are you sure? Because it sounds like it's offensive. Because here it's kind of an offensive term, but it just, I'm like, I'm not comfortable with that word. We'll find something else.
You can just use roll.
I know.
Just say bread roll.
I'm like, bread roll, it sticks in my mouth. I don't like how that sounds. I get, and I also,
well, then you have to set up with that.
I have too much food in most of my books, so these terms are important to me to figure out what they're eating, because, you know, none of my books have people rushing towards limited supplies and fighting over like the 3 scraps of beans they could get. Mine are always eating constantly and have been told, like, don't read Allison's books while fasting. So we have kind of like a different way of doing things. So I need to know, and I'm not going to call it that. That's creepy. Okay, and Elisa wanted to know if you see a difference in your students who would have been year 1 or 2 during COVID. Like, how are they? Because Elisa is also a teacher, so she's seen what's happened. I don't know how you guys handle the quarantine. You're kind of already quarantined. You're an entire continent unto yourselves.
Yeah, ours was much lower level, and I live in Queensland, which was one of the states that was least affected by COVID. If I was in Sydney or Melbourne, it would have been an entirely different story. Melbourne and Sydney definitely copped it. So those teachers will probably tell you something different. Up here, our longest lockdown lasted for 5 weeks. And in that 5 weeks, I still worked the entire time, and we still had what started with about 10% of our student population and grew steadily to around 60% of our student population by the end of lockdown because of our essential workers. Their kids had to come to school. And then suddenly, as time wore on, everyone was an essential worker, because there was nothing that we could do to say, no, you're not, take your child home. So
like, my essential sanity requires this child to not be under.
Yes. Sort of like, this is a hate crime. And it is, because I hate it.
You're like, I hate having, and you want the kids to not miss out or get totally off the rails and stuff. So if you guys weren't as impacted, did you guys do online teaching? Because my husband, who was doing it, my husband, he keeps asking me, you can't see it because it's behind my computer. He has this massive monitor that he got because he was teaching for an entire year then. He started that first year when we went on lockdown. He did the rest of the semester that way. And then the next year, he was put into one of the tracks that was going to do the whole year virtual. And so we got this giant monitor as a second monitor. And he's like, yeah, it's a business expense, because he needed it for teaching. But, you know, it's really nice to watch movies on, honestly. So I'm like, oh, no, gee darn. So I know, like, we almost never watch movies in the place where we have a giant TV, because yes, it's giant, but it's far away from us. Whereas this is like right here. So I'll switch positions and I'm like this far from Lee Pace with foundation. I'm like, hi, what's going on? Hey, I can see every line on your pectoral muscles. But that's just what I do. He probably doesn't sit that close because he's not interested in Lee Pace that way, but that's fine. So yeah, your kids probably aren't as derailed if they weren't gone as long. So that's probably good.
It was definitely a little bit more chill. But even with it, like my daughter at the time was in prep. And I remember as a parent thinking, she's in her first year of school. And going into the lockdown, like, no one had any idea how long it would last for, right? We were just told we were going into lockdown until further notice. And I kept thinking, well, America's been in lockdown, you know, parts of America have been in lockdown for this long now. Like, what if we end up just being in lockdown for 6 months? Like, and what is that going to do with her? Like, this is her foundation year. How far behind is she going to be? And all of the rest of the kids, she's going to miss out on her first half year of school. Like, it was just... it was kind of devastating for me as a mum and a teacher. Luckily, 5 weeks later, we were all back at school. We did have 2 more lockdowns after that, but they only lasted for, I think one of them was 1 week, and then the next one was 2 weeks long. So, like, very short. And it was really, really disruptive, but it didn't derail children. What I have noticed, though, is that the resilience in those children specifically, or in all the children that were affected, like in some ways they became more resilient. They had to learn from home. They had to manage their device. They had to work around the challenges in that. And in other ways, they have lacked resilience so much, or they've lost it, because now I just think the absenteeism is so high now. So high. Kids are missing school for like as they should if they're like genuinely sick. But I think somewhere along the way in COVID, we just went, everyone stay home. If you're even feeling 1% off, just stay home. And I think that's had like
blinking extra. I think you might be sick.
And it's just had this huge impact. I just noticed from like my first years of teaching I've been teaching for almost 11 years now. And from the first years of teaching, I just remember if I had 4 students away in a day, I was like, what's going on? Plague. Did we have the plague run through the class? Like, where are they? Why 4? 4 in one day?
Were they all on a date licking the same nose?
Yeah, and it was an odd occurrence, and you'd tell other teachers, you'd walk in and be like, I've got 4 kids missing today. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? I'm going to have to catch those kids up. Like, it was a huge thing. And now I have on average about 4 kids a day that are absent. Like, that's just the assumed amount of kids that you would have away in a day. And so I think like in that sense, like the absenteeism rate is like so high now. So that's what I've noticed is the biggest thing, is that there's the absenteeism is definitely skyrocketed. And I think it has a pretty profound effect on their attention.
Oh, I'm sure it does. And especially when we've trained them to have to be on online devices, and then we're like, we don't want you on online devices, but we've trained them to need it. It's really hard to kind of go back and be like, okay, not anymore now. Okay, that's done. And we have that same issue here with both our children's and like my personal children, but just the children in general, like all the children here in California. But I remember seeing something on your website that one of your teachers said you wrote like at least adequate for your age, and I was really
thank you for bringing that up.
I hope you got an award for that. Like, did that teacher encourage you, or did that teacher it's stuck in the back of your head going, I'm going to show him?
I didn't come on here to brag,
but you're here anyway.
She did put my poem in an anthology of student poems for that year. That was sent around the entire southeast coast of Queensland, and which means around about 20 schools.
So you've been literary famous for decades.
Basically, this has been the trajectory of my life. Like from that moment, there was no question that I was going to. It was just it was quite obvious to me that I was meant to do this. What did I write about? Can't remember. I remember the same one. The comment that she made about above standard was I had to rewrite the end of The Great Gatsby. And you could rewrite the ending of The Great Gatsby however you wanted. And most students turned in something like the last page. They took the last page of The Great Gatsby and they rewrote the last page. I rewrote the last chapter. Because of course, and for my efforts, I was told that it was above standard. So
that's amazing. And she probably was only mildly annoyed that she had to read more than she probably hoped to read, because that was probably.
I strongly suspect that she didn't read much of it.
Probably not, but that's okay. It's all.
The point
good.
Is that I got an above standard. So.
And translating that to American grades, I'm going to say that's at least a B+, probably, maybe. I don't know. Like, it really would only matter if you're either applying to a college with that grade or going to Chuck E. Cheese and getting tokens for A's for grades. So, I mean, you want to know how many tokens you get and how much skee ball you could get.
Is that a real thing?
It used to be. I don't think it is anymore, because more and more schools have changed it to, like, effort grades, or it's supposed to be, and like, do not get my husband started on this, but it's supposed to be like standards-based grading and all this stuff, and then it just becomes kind of crazy. But all I know is that we used to also be able to get things like pizza for reading more books, and they don't do that for adults anymore, which is probably good because my cholesterol is high and I should not be eating that much cheese anymore, which is sad. But I do feel like we should be rewarding kids and adults for wanting to be good readers and doing that in whatever way they want, including your kids. Like, your students don't read your books. Do they know Do they know you're an author?
Yeah, they do. So my last school that I was at, was pretty good at keeping everything under wraps. Like there really wasn't that many people at the school in terms of staff or students that knew I was on social media, that knew I was like writing this book. And this was before Ledge came out as well. And then as it was coming out, there still weren't that many people. A few of the staff cottoned on, especially like my good friends there, they know all about it. But otherwise, the school community really had zero idea. And then I moved.
Lounge, just like sitting there, going.
It was very safe. It was very safe, and I had to transfer to this new school this year because I'd spent 10 years at this other school, and that's sort of in like our state, that's time up. You've got to move to a new school.
Wait,
so I moved to the new school.
Wait,
yes.
Okay, so like certain denominations of pastors have to move every so often so that they don't get too sedentary. Why do they do that with teachers?
Well, so we're employed by the state and the school. I think I might be wrong, but I think in America, when you go for a job as a teacher, you literally go up to the school and have an interview, and it doesn't quite work the same way here in Australia. You have an interview with the board on the region, and then you're distributed to a school.
Distributed, like you're a resource. Here's 20 pencils and 5. Stacey, did you freeze? I lost Stacey for a second.
Can you see me?
I can see you. Now you're there. You're good. Yeah. So you went and you interviewed at the school board?
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now.
I can hear you.
And you're moving. This is
and
positive.
I'm moving and you're moving. Okay, so you were saying
perfect.
You don't interview at the school, you interview with the state?
Yeah, and then so you're a state teacher and you get put in a region in like reasonable proximity from your house, and after it's changed now it's 5 years but luckily last year it was still 10 years. So once you're 10 years at a school, you get moved on basically to a new school, but now it's changed to 5 years. So technically at this school that I'm at now, after I'm there for 5 years, I could get moved on again. So that's just kind of how it works. What's
the logic for that?
So because our country we're a very, very big country, but we all live on the border, right? Because the center's too hot, but we still have people that live closer to the center. So we still have people that live inland in farming countries and things like in like remote and rural areas. So they need to send teachers there, and they do. But eventually those teachers want to come back, and there has to be room for them. So
that makes some sense.
Yeah, so it's the same with teachers that get sent up north where it's stifling hot and super, super tropical. So in our state, we have both of those. So we have rural and remote areas, and then we have the rural and remote areas that are up north. And they're just most of the time, it's not like a long-term plan for people to live there. They're going there for a few years and then they want to come back. So to be able to allow those people to come back, we have to shuffle people around the area. And we also need to make room for new teachers that are coming in as well. So I think it's just a way to keep everyone moving and to keep no school stagnant as well. If you've got like this rotating staff that's coming in, it also means that if there's teachers that are a bit problematic, like we can try, because they're conflicting with other staff members, we can move people on in that scenario as well before it creates a huge problem. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Obviously, it's not great when you've got kids that you're taking to work with you and that need to change schools when you change schools. But yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. So that's kind of how it works here.
So now at your new school, do they know about CHASM and Ledge?
Yeah, this is the whole point of why we're talking about this.
That's why
I turned up. I turned up to the new school thinking clean slate, and absolutely no one here will know that I'm online or that I'm an author, which is what I want, by the way. Like I would like that to stay like that forever. I walked into my orientation meeting with one of the deputy principals, the principal, and a couple of other new staff members that were starting at the school. We're having this meeting and like, welcome to the school. You'll be teaching here next year. Let us show you around and then tell you all the bits and pieces. And the first thing the deputy principal said to me was, I watched all of your TikToks last night and I went, shit, you're kidding me.
Do I still have a job?
Yeah, and was literally like, why did you do that? And the reason I'm at that school is because I knew one of the other deputy principals there. He used to be my boss at the old school. So I'd contacted him and said, I need to move schools. Is there any way that you can find a position for me there? And he did. He was standing in the doorway just smiling at me. And I'm like, you did this. You did all of this. Mm-hmm. He then proceeded to like show a copy of my book that he had purchased to everyone. So I walked in on one of my first days and met my teaching team, and every single one of them knew. A couple of them had already read the book. They all at this point had followed me online, at least on Instagram. And then when I walked into my classroom on the first day, 2 of the children had a copy of the book on their desk. And when I saw it, I went, oh, why do you have that? Why do you have that? And I thought, did Mum put this in your bag and be like, get Mrs. Mac to sign it?
Please sign it.
Ask Mrs. Mac to sign it. Like, is that what happened? No, what happened was the word got around. The parents of these kids knew. And so they were like, oh, I'll purchase the book for you and you can read it in class. That'll be a great thing to do.
No.
So I went, what is, and I went, oh my God. And I just immediately went, listen, no. This is an adult book. It's not a children's book. It's not a middle fiction book. I didn't write it for children. And this thing, it's too violent. That's all I say. I say it's too violent and it's got adult things. It's not meant for you. And if Mum and Dad knew the kinds of themes and stuff were in it, they wouldn't be happy for you to read it. And I'm like, this could also be having the opposite effect on 10-year-olds. If I tell them that there's content in there that's adult themed and stuff, all that's going to make them want to go read it, right? So I was like, Jesus Christ. I could be shooting myself in the foot, but I said, put it in your bag and take it home. Thank you so much. And they did. And I then had to send a blanket email to all parents saying, yes, I did write a book. It's not for children. Please don't buy it for your young'un and send it into school for them to read in their free time. Please check the trigger warnings before you buy books.
Seriously, you are very good at putting the trigger warnings on there.
Right.
Like I've got your website scrolling below here, and you do not hide that there are trigger warnings of things.
No, because I don't want people to think that this is appropriate for children. It's not.
No.
But I understand that people might think that automatically if they know that I'm a teacher. So I'm like, no, that's like these 2 parts of my life I keep very, very separate. I also have the issue of 10-year-olds following me on social media because they're 10 and they all have social media now. So they started, so I had to threaten and do like all the things to say, if I find out that you're following me on social media, not only will I won't just block you, I will report you to TikTok. I will have your parents sit down with me and discuss the fact that you are following a teacher, which is completely inappropriate and it's violating our relationship. Like I had to do all of the things. So thankfully I haven't had problems in that regard, but these are all things that I had to contend with going into this new school, keeping in mind that initially I thought I was walking into a new school with a clean slate. No one knew who I was. No one knew anything. And I was just going to be like, I'm just a teacher. Don't worry about what I do in my free time. No, that was not the case.
And the books are out, so it's too late to be like, Melissa O'Connor, who does write under a pen name, she's like, that's why I'm writing a pen name. Yeah, it's too late though, Melissa.
Yes.
It's too late.
If there's one thing that I could change in all of this, it would have been to use a pen name.
Use a pen name so you don't. I mean, I use 2 different pen names, but they're both my real name. But that for me is because I do write in 2 different genres, but they're all adult books. And so when my almost 8-year-old says, you know what my favorite author is? You. I'm like, you are not allowed to read my books, child. And he's just saying that because he's kissing up. Because the flip side of that is also he's obsessed with YouTube. And I'm like, I'm on YouTube. He's like, no, you're not. I'm like, no, but I am. I want to go live with the YouTubers. And I go, you do live with the YouTubers. Like, no, I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not like Mr. Beast or whatever. And I don't have branded energy chocolates or whatnot. Okay, so we are almost at an hour and I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I would be remiss if I didn't share Cap's question. Any suggestion for querying authors? I think I read somewhere that you did a TikTok pitch for your book. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've queried agents in the past with like different manuscripts when I was a lot younger and with no success at all. I didn't really do it with too much gusto. There's not a lot of agents here in Australia, but I did manage to find the details of like 3 different ones and sent them my stuff. and and had no success. And when it came to writing Ledge, I actually didn't even think about querying an agent. I just went straight ahead and thought, I'm just going to self-publish this thing. I had followers, and I thought, I'm just going to utilize the followers that I have to sell this book. So I'd sort of given up on the idea that I might be able to find an agent. I didn't have any trust in the process of it, and I knew that I wasn't very skilled at querying either. Like writing a query letter, no thank you. Writing a synopsis, absolutely not. So hard. So I pitched it on TikTok to like my audience. Like I said what kind of book it was going to be, what the premise of the book was. I showed the cover, I shared the title. But before I had all of that stuff ready to go, I was making my usual silly fun content, and I was hinting that I was writing a book and it was going to be fantasy romance, and it was going to have all the best tropes and none of the crap tropes, and just saying things like that. And people were like, great, can't wait to read it, not knowing a damn thing other than that. But for some reason, there were still people that were like willing to give it a shot. And this was more in the earlier days of Book Talk, I suppose, where people were a lot more trusting. And I shared a couple of like small quotes and excerpts from the book and things along the way, but very sparsely. And then I did that big pitch, and it went really well. And that's how Amy Collins, who is our agent, found me. And she found me through that pitch, and a couple of publishers found me through that pitch as well. And I think it just gets shared and passed around, and eventually it finds someone in the industry. I think if you're querying agents right now want to know that you are actively involving yourself in online communities, because it's such a huge market, and it's one of our only ways to reach large amounts of readers. So if you're in Discord groups, if you're on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, and you're involving yourself in those communities, whether you've managed to trick a bunch of people into following you or not, like I did, I don't think it matters that you are actively engaged in that. So I think lots of people go, oh, no, I've only got like 300 people that follow me, so there's no point mentioning that in my career letter. Yes, there is. Even if you don't say I've got 300 people following me, say I'm an active member of the Bookstagram community. Tell them that you're involved in those communities, because they want to hear that, because it saves them the breath needed to persuade you to go ahead and do those things that they need you to do anyway. If you're already doing them, they're like, well, great, at least they're on board. I think that's really important, and it is what they want to hear right now. So if you're coming at them with like, I don't do any of those things, I'm not online at all, or they can't see that, then they're probably going, well, like, is this already too hard? Unfortunately, that's just like the nature of it. They look at all of those things first, and then after they've looked at those things, they read the premise of the book. They read the synopsis. They don't read the synopsis first.
And I think you will even see that now, like when I have done more recent querying, you'll just see more and more places where it's like, show me your social media, show me what's your website, what's your presence like. And it's not necessarily they're looking for how many followers, but they want to see, are you actually doing these things?
They want to know, they want to know that you're on board with it. I think that's more it. And I think you're shooting yourself in the foot querying and not mentioning those things because you're worried that follower number isn't high enough or anything. Don't worry about it. They want to see that you're engaged in it, that you're trying, that you're willing to put that work in. That's what they're looking for more than anything. So like things like this that Allison's doing, like your do we call it a podcast?
It's live streaming. It is. Yeah. It's a live podcast, but there's an audio version that goes later. So I know sometimes when I'm doing those things, I have to transcribe it.
Things like this, amazing. Like, what more could they possibly ask of you?
Well, and I think some of it, like you said, it's the willingness, because I think old school, there used to be an old school of authors are like, my job is to write the books and I am not the product and I don't need to. And that was great 30 years ago, but that doesn't exist anymore. And
not the case anymore. Exactly.
And now, of course, Kat is a shrinking violet and is scared of interacting with humans online. Just kidding. She's like she's got a huge Instagram following and TikTok. Well, it's Twitter, but it's not Twitter, X, whatever. She's great on that and is one of the funniest people I know. So she's totally fine. doing
Yeah,
all
good
that.
on you. Well, then you're going to smash it.
She's awesome, but I know she's looking for more tips, and I think everybody always is, because it is just stupid competitive. And you mentioned podcasts. I make no secret of the fact that when I met with my now agent, who's our agent, I had not queried her because she was closed to queries, and she's like, I'm a huge fan of your show. I'm like, you watch my show? And that was a huge thing. And I think there are more agents out there now who are looking for people who are like, what do you bring besides just what you wrote? What else can you bring to the table? And
because
you have to have a book to back it up, though. So just it can't be all podcast and no writing. You got to do both.
Yeah, and that's like the tricky balance of it all. But you're absolutely right. It's I wish that this industry, I think everyone wishes that this industry was based only on merit. Just the merit of your writing. But almost no workplace or industry anywhere is based solely on merit. It's just not the case anymore. Once upon a time, absolutely not anymore.
I'm sure it was at one point in time, and I also know that so much has changed when there is the indie arm where people can kind of just do their own thing, and you're seeing more indie authors get signed with big deals after they've already made.
Usually not heard. It used to be like a cardinal rule that if you had a book and you posted it yourself, if you self-publish that book, there's no hope for that book later getting signed. That's it. Like, you have expended, like, do you know what I mean? Like, that used to be a cardinal rule. You do not distribute your book that you're hoping to get signed. Like, as soon as you do that, that book is off the table. Absolutely not. We're not touching it with a 10-foot pole. Now it happens all the time. People who self-publish a book, the book goes really well, and then publishing houses are all sidling up to them like, hey, have you ever thought of being traditionally published? Like, it's happening all the time now. So it's kind of been, and it's all social media based. Like, it's just social media has just flipped the industry on its head, and it's just trying really hard to catch up.
It is, and I know. So I've already told Stacey, come to our Discord where Amy's clients come and cause problems. And one of the things she shared with us is that, like, TikTok is having, and I don't understand all the details, so I'm not even going to try to give them. They're doing their own publishing arm. TikTok and the social media industry has changed a lot of stuff. Bookstagram is a thing. You go into Barnes and Noble, it's like TikTok made me do it, and has these TikTok books.
Yeah.
So it's all these things that it's not the same as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's changed everything, and how you find an agent, it's going to be different for everybody, but you still got to write a good book. You still got to make sure you have a strong query letter, but all those other things help so much, and standing out whatever way you can is always good. I mean, personally, that you play string bass. I'm saying there's no reason your husband John can't write a song that is one of your query letters, and then the bird and the beard do it as a live number and put it on there. And I don't know what could happen if he's cooperating. Look, Stacey's Michael cooperates, and I know your husband is at least sort of cooperative with things, Kat. So I'm just saying, do it. Possibly, maybe not.
That you use the word cooperate. Do you know what else I would do? And I suggested this before to people, is if you already have somewhat of an online presence, whether it's small, medium, big, somewhere in between, you don't talk about your writing and your book ad nauseum, but talk about it sometimes. And then any likes, comments, follows, any encouragement that you receive from that online community, throw it in an agent's face. Look, I've already talked about what I'm writing, and look how much interest I've got. Look how many people want to read it. Like, use that. That is so enticing to anyone in this industry right now. Is there already a readership that's built into this possible book? Like, how easy is that to flaunt? So do it strategically. Obviously, if your account is nothing but you talking about this idea that you've got in your brain that you're trying to write, people are going, what else are you offering though? Otherwise I'm not following. But use that, like, leverage it. That's why you're doing it in the first place, right? It's a stepping stone to somewhere else. And yes, those accounts that we have, they can be really enjoyable, like, creative places sometimes, but they're also supposed to be serving a bigger purpose. So use it.
I think that's an excellent tip, Stacey. And with that, we are almost at an hour and 10 minutes, and that's not how long we're supposed to go. I'm terrible. We should have stopped it a while ago, but then
I do this on almost every single thing that I happen to appear on.
I'm fine with it. I just wanted to say thank you, and we barely even talked about your books, and so I know some people know you from your TikTok. to not even know your book. So I just want to make sure we do remind people, Stacey writes these amazing books. I have my sweater proving that they are set in cold places that Stacey doesn't want to go, which I don't blame her because she makes them sound horrible, except for the parts that are amazing. And then like sexy guys, some who have like sexy wings. I did not wear wings. I did consider wearing wings, but I only have like kid butterfly wings, which would not, they weren't right.
Yeah, it's not quite the same vibe.
No. And I don't have my mage wand, but I could have used one of my kids' little mixie wands. It's only about like 2 inches and it wouldn't really work. I'd have to have it right at the camera. But these books are amazing. I did want to ask, when does the third one come out? Where are we in the process of that third book? And can I have it now?
The third book I've only just finished writing, which is really exciting. So we're in the editing phases of it now, but it won't release until September next year. So
a whole year. Yeah, that's
sorry, not sorry.
No, well, we wanted to
slow moving machine.
Honestly, no. Traditional publishing, one a year is actually, I want to say, pretty standard. Yeah, 1.5, 2 is normal too.
Honestly, anything more than 1 a year is considered an accelerated release. So
that's a bit much. And sometimes you see other things because people have deals with multiple publishers or in different genres. So they're like, book here, book there, and all this stuff. And then books are just flying out. And that's great if you can pull it off. But I think it's unrealistic to expect high quality books like yours are to be thrown at us like monthly. These are not People magazine where it's just all pictures and some fluff, because your books are they're not fluff. There's fantasy and it's romance, but I don't feel like there's fluff. Not really.
And I appreciate it.
Well, and it's funny because your books are, it's not that there's not any wit or humor in them, because it's there, but they're not funny books. These are not comedies. These are like, people are dying. People's freedom is at stake.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Life and death stuff. People are getting their souls sucked out, and then you're like, hey, here's my fantasy boyfriend. He's a balloon. So it's kind of like, hey, bring us back to where the hard stuff's happening, where the axe hits the tree, and people may or may not be getting decapitated. I don't really know. I think that didn't happen. But people are literally living and dying, and where you've left us at the end, I can't say anything because some people are just like, wait, there's books. So go read Ledge and then go read CHASM. Do you have a title for book 3 that I get next September or earlier if I beg nicely?
I think we're going to reveal the title and the cover of the third book together, like in one parcel. So I can't tell you what it is now. We only really just decided on it because I had a name in my head for the third book for ages and ages. And I wanted it to follow along with, like, Ledge and CHASM are both place names. So I wanted the third one to be a one-word place name as well. That just made sense to me. But if I did that, it would actually kind of spoil the third book before people even read it. So
I get that
because of where book 2 leaves off. If I then say book 3 is called this, enter the place name here, people are like, oh, so that's where they end up then. Like it kind of led to a spoilery type territory. So I went, okay, so we can't
bring it back.
We can't do that. So it's sitting on my in my documents right now, and it's still called that. Like I haven't had the heart to change it yet because I've had it in my head for so long that that's what the third book's going to be called, but it's not now. It's going to be called something different. Still a place name, still a one-word place name to follow the theme. But it's going to be. I can tell you that the cover is going to be green. Make of that what you will.
Well, it would be a nice completion. So if anybody saw on social media, I had the 2 covers and trying to find something that went with the colors, because like the Ledge is more dark blue and then ice looking, and then CHASM's got the red. Oh, you got them. Yeah. See, I listened to both of them, which is why I was like, I got an arc. I'm like, but it's coming out on audio. I want to hear it. So yeah. So you can see and CHASM is more. Okay, your version even looks more purple in person. Those are gorgeous. They are gorgeous.
I love them so much.
And
so this one's like, I guess it's like a maroon.
Yeah, maroon.
It's like a ready, I
like it. Yeah,
So obviously blue for the Ledge, and then this is showing like the night sky looking up at it from the CHASM. And then the third cover will be green, and it will match. I just can't tell you what the name is. So make of that what you will.
Speculative. No, and I love that you're continuing the trend, but then also being aware of, okay, I can't say this or that, and I'm going to be talking in super vague things that people who haven't read are be like, what? Things happen at the end of book 1 that I'm like, how are you going to do this in book 2? And then things change in book 2, and I'm like, okay, here we go. But you can't even talk about those things. So it's
it's so hard. I know. It's been my biggest challenge is like talking about the books without talking about the books.
Yeah, and like, how do you, when you blurb a second book without spoiling what happened at the end of book 1, especially if someone looks at them not knowing what order, it's like, after this thing happened, crap, and then you've just spoiled your entire first book. You're like, thank you for knowing the order of the stuff and the thing. So yeah, don't do it.
Correct.
You have lovely audiobooks. I thoroughly enjoyed them. You didn't have the same narrator for both of them, but they were both really well done.
No.
So I don't know if you listened to them. I just want to know why you didn't narrate them, because then they would have had the cool Australian accents.
This is a great question that I have received many times.
Yes.
My answer is that it doesn't. I'm just going to give you an example, actually.
Okay, read it.
Okay. I just want you to pretend that you're hearing this with like a very like BBC British accent, like a really fancy one that we would typically put with this kind of medieval fantasy. And then I want you to hear the juxtaposition of my voice. Okay. The cold is cruel, but it's not alive. It can consume you, extort you, and convince you to do unspeakable things. It can turn your enemies into body heat and your friends into the coats you steal from their backs. The cold does not live, but there can be no ridding yourself of it. I just don't think that has the same effect as like BBC pronunciation, you know?
I mean, you're right. And Kat said she, I can't do math. How many zeros is that? She 10,000% would listen. I would too. But it is funny because I hadn't heard your TikToks, and then I listened to both these books, and then I'm hearing that, and then I'm like, well, why isn't she doing this? Especially even how you say some of the names, because as I joke, and it's not a major character, you've used some of the names from your characters in the book in your TikTok videos with your husband.
Yeah.
Michael isn't one of them. I'm married to a Michael too, so I appreciate that he's left out of it. And
there will never be a Michael, unfortunately.
Michael's not a fantasy name.
No.
But like Dawson and Ryan and like Ruby. Okay, Ruby's a name we kind of know. And then Baltise. My brain just does not get that one. King Vasteel. My brain wants to turn into Bastille. And it's like, no,
that's fine.
So you probably even pronounce these differently, but your narrators do sound BBC British, like we expect, because that's not like the American expectation is high fantasy. It's British, maybe New Zealand, because we have like the Hobbits. We appreciate Hobbits sounding like Kiwis. That's usually all right. So.
I've been to America a couple of times in my life, and I was so shocked by the amount of people that were like, "I love your accent," and I was like, "Why? This is the dirtiest, like slackest accent in the entire world." I'm convinced of it. It is a bastardization of the British language, like of a British accent. I'm fully convinced that when we were convicts sailing over here from Britain, it was because we couldn't speak properly. Like, that's what I think it was. And then they brought us here and went, get out, you're an embarrassment. But yeah, I think it's the Brits don't find our accent appealing, but Americans do.
But we do. And I think that's what I don't understand, because I would have to go back and look at one of those history timelines to go, okay, your convict ancestors got to Australia and they're like, here, go play with the pouch animals. And then we got sent over and then we did the thing in Hamilton and we will be back and all that. And we don't sound anything like you. None of us do. We don't sound like you guys, but you guys sound, it doesn't sound like the Brits, but I hear where it comes from. How did we end up sound like this? And I mean, I try to tone it down, so I'm not like totally Valley Girl, but I sound very Californian when I'm not paying attention. And I do pick up other accents because my background is Pennsylvanian, so I sound a little bit Penna Dutch when I'm around too many of my relatives, and I'm like, oh, I sound like a Philly person. I need to stop that too. But we don't sound like the UK, and so I don't know where we just said, okay, now we're independent. We aren't going to talk like you guys anymore, and we just lost it.
I think we're just on this island over here, and we're isolated, and we're also like a very young country. Like, it wasn't that long ago that we were brought over here. Our lineage really does not go back very far. Yours goes back a lot further. Like, you guys have been in America for a while. Like, you've been there for a while. we have not been in this country for like all that long. So perhaps our accent just hasn't morphed yet. Or perhaps we're just so isolated from the rest of the world that we just, I don't know, there was no influence. You guys were influenced by a few different areas.
We are, because we have different regions. And I will just say, and then I really should wrap this up, but I will just say, as a parent, maybe the reason we find your accent so comforting is you all sound like the Wiggles, and we love the Wiggles. Oh, it's like the Wiggles.
Well, maybe that's the secret.
We're like Rockabye Your Bear, and we all want to sound like, and I'm like OG Wiggles, and my eldest saw the original Wiggles, and the later ones are lovely too. And I don't know if Anthony's still doing it.
Yeah, but we didn't vibe. I always showed the OG Wiggles to both of my kids.
OG, and as much as I like a girl who plays drums in a bow that's bigger than her head, I'm like, no, Anthony and Wake Up Jeff and Murray, and obviously
Murray, sweet Murray.
Those are my guys. And maybe that's just, we hear that and we think, oh, the kids are going to calm down, because I used to play Wiggles incessantly for my eldest, and that would make her calm down. So I feel like there's something genetic in us that we hear the Australian accent, we go, oh, it's all right, everything's fine.
We might be onto something.
We could be. It's just Wiggles. I don't know. Stacey, you are amazing and hilarious. And folks, you see her website is scrolling down below. Also follow her, links are on that website to follow her on TikTok and all these things. And then just go buy her books, because they are awesome. You can get them on Audible like I did, because I'm an ear person. I like those. And you can get the physical copies if you're a bookshelf person, like Stacey obviously is, to have the gorgeous ones. You just pet the covers. I think Pat and Melissa and crew are like, yes, I want to pet my covers. But Stacey, you're amazing. Please come join us on Discord, because we love you. And everybody, we will see you next month. I will go from the glaciers to far space, because I'm going to have Essa Hansen on, and I will have to learn all the technical jargon between now and then. And it's not going to be pretty, but I'm going to try. Bye, everybody.
Commitment. Bye.
Bye.